plan it, and I've been ridiculously busy. So if you are watching this on Facebook, congratulations, because I didn't really post anything on Facebook or on social media that this was actually going to happen today, just purely because both of myself and my guest, who is about to come on, are very, very busy, and we didn't I sort of planned, but then didn't plan, and that's just typically me. So I'm lucky enough to chat to one of my very, 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 very good friends, Kevin Demers from Montreal. We're going to chat about it a little bit. Now, I want to really get perspective for our listeners here in BC, just how heavy it has been to be an operator in Montreal and Toronto today, because I think the East Coast has been hit ridiculously hard compared to us. So they're always the ones that I try and compare to people and say, hey, listen, like, at least we're not the East Coast. So I'd like to welcome everybody to Kevin Demers.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Good. So a little backstory. I want to get into the origin story very shortly. Right now, you've got obviously Coldroom, which is phenomenal little speakeasy that you did about 5 years ago. Is it coming up onto its 5 years anniversary now?
Let's see here. Yeah, 5 years. It's as of September coming up. Yeah, like this year, it's going to be 5 years.
Does this last year count, or was this a skip year?
I don't even know anymore. 3 months, so who knows?
Then you did El Pequeno in 2018, and then you did Parliament 20. Did you do Parliament 2019? You did Parliament in 2019 because that was the last time I was in Montreal with you. Yeah,
2019 and end of August 2019, and then obviously March hit and COVID's been here, so we didn't really get a full year under our belt. So it's a very interesting problem because it's a place that didn't get enough recognition as we wanted to. And it's funny because there's a few other restaurant and bar groups as well in Montreal that have the same problem. It's like we didn't get a full year, so to actually brand the business again, it's like, do you rebrand it? Do you restart? What do you do? There's like, it's a whole thing.
So let's get back way back to your origin story. Like, how'd you get in the industry, and where? Because I usually like to start that because it usually sets the tone for the whole interview. Where did you get your start, and how did you get started in the bar industry?
How did I get? Did we ever talk about this? Well, if we didn't, you'll learn quick. So I got started when I was about to be 18. So in Canada or in Quebec, it's 18 and over to be allowed to go in bars and drink. Obviously, in Montreal and or in Quebec, usually by the time you're 16, you're already in a bar drinking. That's just the culture, unfortunately. Unfortunately or fortunately, it doesn't really, it's one of those like French things. And I was a super shy kid growing up, and for some reason I had the bright idea that working at a bar would make sense and make it a little bit easier for me to speak to people. And I didn't want to be a waiter just because of the fact that I had to go and approach people. I needed people to come to see me, and I'd be more comfortable. And going behind the bar, especially where I started working, my first place that I started working, which I got this job from Chris Natale, who had a bartending school at the time. He actually is, I believe, bartending presently at the Four Seasons. Well, kind of on hiatus right now with everything going on, but was bartending there. And got me this job at Thursdays, and I started as a busboy barback. And it was basically like a meat market cougar bar. And you have this little 18-year-old, can't even grow a mustache properly in there. And it's just, I really learned a lot. And my mentor over there, his name was Dominic. He just passed, actually. He was older. He was in his 60s at the time. And like, you can't get a better mentor than that to break out of your shell. Like this old Portuguese man that basically every hotel rule of like abusing clients and stuff like that, not like in a bad way, but just like doing random stupid stuff behind a bar. That's basically what my mentor was this like old man who just was an absolute riot to be around and just always brought the energy behind the bar. And that's what I was accustomed to. And then down the road, led into learning about all the classics, because believe it or not, they had all the 80s classics. So like the legit 80s classics.
I don't think we're old
mixes and everything.
we can't start calling them classics quite yet.
That's why I say 80s classics. And then, in all honesty, I always use bartending as one thing, as multiple avenues. So one was for me to actually have a chance to speak to people properly and sort of get out of my comfort zone of being so shy, because I literally could not speak to a girl. If I thought a girl was pretty, forget it. I'd never be able to speak to her. And behind the bar just opened me up like quickly, whether it was because of alcohol or because it just made me a lot more comfortable and there was that barrier in between me and a client. It gave me the opportunity to really to find myself. And then at the same time, I was trying to find myself as well outside of the bar. So doing that on the weekends, during the week, it'd be me time. So I would try to invest any money that I made in bars and restaurants into myself. So my God, you name it, I did it. I invested it in physical training to play professional hockey. And I was still bartending at the same time. I invested into school. I went to UCLA for writing for film and television, just because of my creative background. Somebody told me it would be a good idea. I started 2 other businesses in between. I had a production company. And I just believed that in my 20s, it was important to invest in myself as opposed to investing it into traveling and things like that. And then in my 30s, I'd be able to invest my time a little bit better into traveling and things like that and seeing the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the plan was working pretty well up until COVID hit, I think, like everybody.
So where was the transition that made you sort of go, you know what, I think I want to open my own venue? Because Coldroom for Montreal was one of the sort of first like cocktail bars, a handful of the very first like proper cocktail bars sort of emerging in Montreal, especially bartender owned. I think we've talked about bartender owned bars.
Yeah.
Because I think there's always a lot of cocktail bars in places and they get good GMs and stuff like that, but like a bartender owned bar. What was that transition for you to make that move into opening up Coldroom?
You know what? I've always had that. Even when I was 18, to be honest with you, and I'm not disrespecting any one of the owners that I worked for down like in my past, but I always told myself that there was just certain things that I saw in the industry that I was like, I know I can do this and I can do it better. At least that's how I felt. And you know what, in all honesty and in all fairness, I think everyone says the same thing until they actually have to do it.
Yes.
And then it's a whole thing. And, you know, the thing that makes it so special for me is that I really did this on my own. And that's the thing that's also scary. And micromanaging so many things along the way on top of everything else of while I was opening Coldroom. My daughter was in the process of being born. That was a whole song and dance. It was a lot. And I think I still have PTSD over it, but the transition for me really started up about, I don't even know the year, but it's about 5 years, 6 years before Coldroom, where I probably even a bit more than that. But it was me and a friend of mine. At the time, I was managing a club called Rouge, and it was me and a friend of mine who was a DJ at the time. We were talking about opening a business together, something outside of it. Obviously, like, you know, in the cocktail community, you get kind of, excuse the language, but shit on a little bit working in a club, when in reality, why you're working in a club is for the money, because, you know, you're kind of selling your soul for a certain, you know, a pretty penny. You know, we talked about it, didn't go through, and I just stayed patient. And then I found this, and then I moved to the old port of Montreal, which is more or less the happening area. And lo and behold, what ended up happening is a very good friend of mine got me to work at a place called Santos, which is still open now. It's been open like 12 years, which is more of like a supper club, restaurant club, very popular in Montreal. where it's you can go there to eat, and then by 10 o'clock it just turns into pandemonium. It's a big thing in Montreal. And in all honesty, I'm pretty sure like any supper club in New York got their idea from Montreal, because it's been around since the 80s, even 70s, my argument. Good friend of mine got me to work there, who was the manager at the time, and I ended up being the head bartender. And this competition randomly came up called Bombay Sapphire Most Imaginative Bartender. I never heard of a bartending competition at the time.
What year was it?
I knew. Oh man, this was 2000. I'm gonna argue 2012. I think it might even be earlier than that, 2010. I know Obama was around, because I think he was the cover of the magazine, and I'm in the spread of that magazine. So anyway, that whole story was actually pretty interesting, because how Bombay Sapphire worked at that time, and I think it was the best template that was around for cocktail competitions, and I still believe in that. It was by invitation only, and if you needed an invitation, you actually needed an invitation to get in. And I didn't get invited. It was my buddy that got invited, Justin Sabini, who I actually still think is one of the top managers in Montreal, or operators even. And he looked at me and he goes, "Listen, I really don't want to do it. What do you think?" And I was like, "It's not really for me. I don't even know what it is." And he goes, "Honestly, you're one of the most creative guys that I've ever met." At the time, I had a men's accessory company. We were selling bow ties and ties, an online store. And he goes, it's super random, right? But I always had that entrepreneur side of me there. And again, this falls into the investing in myself. And he goes, "If you win, you get the cover of GQ magazine. And it would be great promotion for your bow tie company." So I was like, Jesus Christ, that's a great idea. So I really got into it and zoned in on cocktails again. And to be honest with you, I really did fall out of the cocktail side of things for a long time. In Montreal at the time, that was about 2-3 years before Coldroom opened. The one place that was dying out at that time was the W Hotel had a cocktail bar called the Wonder Bar, and that's basically where all like the cocktail guys were basically working at that time. And then it was like kind of fading out, because it was already open, I think, for about 8 years. And then that's where about 2 years after this Bombay competition, 2-3 years after, some really well-recognized cocktail bars open in Montreal, which are Atwater Cocktail Club, Cloakroom, Coldroom, and Quatrième Mur, I believe, was open 2 years or a year or two before us. So you had those sort of big names that sort of popped up. So anyway, long story short, I ended up winning this competition by some miracle or whatever it was. And it was actually Raj that was one of the main judges. And that's where I made one of my biggest contacts in the industry. And that's why I've been so loyal to Bombay for such a long time, because I won that year, and then everyone in Montreal just turned around and go, "This guy shouldn't have won. It was a crock of shit, da, 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 da." And I went, you know what? Okay, I'll do it again. And I just zoned in on winning the competition a second year, and I actually somehow won the second year again. And this time I won all of Canada. And I didn't win just the regionals. I won Canadian. And I just said, you know what? I'll end on a high note. I won 2 competitions, and we'll go from there. And that was the same year that I opened Coldroom. And the rest is basically history at that point. It's just my love for cocktails really came back from that, and then I built from there. Like I've said a few times, my career was built for a long time, since I'm about 18, but my career was really built off of a $15 cocktail. And what I mean by that is one cocktail gave me the opportunity to open all of these doors. And like I'll give you the best example. My number one contact, my biggest contacts actually still come from that competition, and this is like 8 years ago now.
So when you opened Coldroom, you sort of cobbled it together. I know I've know this story because we've talked about it a number of times. You sort of cobbled together Coldroom, and in the most epic way. Like, I think obviously you can romance your story because a lot of people assume that every person opens their first bar the way you did it.
Oh my God, have you heard Dave Mitten's way?
Oh yeah, about Harbor.
His is worse than mine, I think.
Well, there was Trotsky's as well. Trotsky's when he did was hardcore as well.
Yeah.
So once you started rolling with Coldroom, now again, you, as you were saying, you're sort of in this middle ground where cocktail culture is just sort of just starting. You're risking everything on possibly opening a cocktail bar that's going to be successful. Mm-hmm. History-wise, like, I know that you, for the uninitiated and the people that are listening that may be, hopefully traveling this year sometime, maybe to Montreal, what is the story behind Coldroom? Because I think the Coldroom story is fantastic. I think the way you've laid it out and stuff is one of my favorite speakeasies that I've been to anywhere in the world. I've always really loved Coldroom before we sort of met and became friends. For the uninitiated, tell people about what Coldroom is.
Coldroom is a cocktail bar that originated into the idea behind it just comes from the actual story of the building. I'm a fanatic of history, and I got into the history of the building. The building's almost like 200 something years old, and I found out that space actually used to be a cold room for the fresh fruits and vegetables for the Square Jacques Cartier market, which was just not even a block away. And I just built the story off of that. But it really starts from me, like I said before, I was looking for a space for about 6 years that I can just walk into that has an alcohol permit. Mind you, I didn't know what I was walking into in this space because, again, a 200-year-old building comes with 200-year-old problems.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about building a space out, and I think you can contest to this, the space itself will have, as soon as you open one wall, you're going to have 100 problems behind that. And you're just like, oh my God. And again, it's 200 years of problems that people have just patched over. So it took me about 8 months to convince the landlord to give it to me. Reason being is because what I was looking for was a space that was low rent, that the business was going under, and I could just take the space over. The problem is that space itself actually went through some legal issues with the tenant and the landlord because the tenant didn't pay rent, so the landlord took him to court. So because it was in court, the landlord wasn't able to rent it out. So what I was doing to show interest was I called my landlord, my now landlord, about minimum 3 times a week, just going, is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? I'm interested. I'm interested. And honestly, this is a person that I really look up to now, my landlord. I did even then because it's the first person that really put business perspective in my mind and ripped into me, going, what do you know about operating a bar? What do you know? Because I had he goes, show me your experience. I'm like, well, I ran this, I won this cocktail competition. He goes, and? So show me financial experience. I was like, well, I don't really have any. Okay, show me a budget. So I built a budget. I did everything. I showed him everything. And he goes, okay, well, maybe we can work with this. He goes, I need an operator. He goes, I'm not looking for anyone just to take the space. I need somebody to take the space. And I know if I call him, he's going to be there. And we just built a really strong relationship because of that. And 8 months go by. And this is the interesting part of the story is, in July 2015? I think it's 2015. My daughter was going to be born 9 months later. And I just went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, because I felt like I was in a situation where I was just bartending at that point and I didn't have anything stable because I just changed jobs into a new bar that I was working at. And I went to New Orleans with my brother that weekend. And I was just telling him, I was like, man, what do I do? Do I get out of the industry, and do I just focus on like a regular career? And the typical regular career thing, because bartending isn't something for parents and this and that, whatever that means. It's just something society kind of puts in your head. And at that time, it was Tales of the Cocktail. So that's where, again, it was another sort of aha moment where I was like, oh my God, this is what I got to do. I've been already working 8 months on this project. This is what I have to do. And I had another job offer for a film company in Toronto at the time. So I had to kind of make a decision. No joke, that weekend when I landed on the Monday in Montreal, my landlord called me going, the space is available. If you want it, come and sign the lease. So it turned into like this serendipitous moment of, this is what I need to be doing. So I ran over, signed the lease, and the rest is history. Then it took 12 months to open the space.
So let's fast forward. You did Coldroom in 2016, El Pequeno, which is my favorite little Cuban bar. The one thing that I am missing as much now that after I got diagnosed as a celiac last year, is I can't have Cubanos anymore, which is just absolutely killing me. So I have my Cubano guy here in Victoria. And there's been a couple of times you've sent Cubanos from Montreal in Victoria, because I do think that you have one of the best Cubanos. So El Pequeno is the smallest bar in Quebec.
From what I know, Quebec, people keep saying Canada, but I don't think it is. It's 150 square feet, to be more specific, 146 square feet. So it's
like 8 people.
Yeah, it's standing on top of that. So like to get the liquor board to agree to that was like complicated, because they looked at the floor plan going, well, where are the seats? And that's where I was like, well, it's a stand-up bar. Well, we don't understand that. So it took like 2-3 months for me to convince them to give me a permit with no seating.
And then so El Pequeno is your little Cuban joint just upstairs from Coldroom. I absolutely love that space. Your daiquiris are epic. And then Parliament in 2019, which is what keeps driving you to try and change? Like, you could have easily just opened up another Pequeno or another cocktail bar. You keep changing concepts completely. What keeps driving you to push the envelope and keep changing up the establishments that you open?
Diversifying. I think opening the same thing over and over again, you're just shooting yourself in your foot. You're also diluting your clients. You're also putting money into one pocket and just putting it into the other one. You're going from your left pocket to your right pocket. To me, it just makes sense to give different experiences and diversify your portfolio, really. Like, I don't see Montreal as a big enough island to be doing 5-6 cold rooms. Again, it just shows in the history of the city. Like, one spot will open. Just take speakeasies for an example. There was like 10 of them that opened the same time as Coldroom, Cloakroom, and Atwater Cocktail Club, and they all died out within 3 years. And then it's always the ones that kind of, I don't want to say open first, but the ones that really define what their concept is first, that kind of last the test of time, if you want. But it really varies. Honestly, it varies from city to city. If it was a New York or a Toronto, oh my God, I'd open like 4 or 5 cold rooms, and I wouldn't even think twice. But I don't see the point of just doing the same thing. What I do like is the micro bar idea. I like the idea of the El Pequeños, where somebody can just walk in. It's one employee. It's not complicated. The idea and the concept, slaps you in the face right away. You understand it. It's, like I said, it's not complicated. I think those micro bars, something that's very European. That's something that should be coming to Montreal or any other North American city. Also, it's a lot lighter on the pockets as far as rent goes, staffing goes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's what's important. But again, that's just me. I look at it as low risk, high reward. If the concept's really defined well for 140 square feet, honestly, the money that we were generating in that space was better than some places that are 5,000 square feet. So,
Yeah, my podcast last week with Jill Coxon was really knuckling down on those sort of like those fundamentals. So Parliament is this is going to be really weird because if anyone who's ever been to Montreal or Quebec in general, if you speak English, you're I don't want to say not welcome, but if you speak English,
not far.
and that's what Parliament is. Parliament is an old English pub.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Well, so we've actually adapted. Like again, now the issue that we were kind of touching on before is the space itself never had a full year to sort of flourish and like define itself. And I'm very big on having a space developing into what the customers want when customers are walking in. Like you have a general idea of what the space is, but the clients kind of set the tone in the first few months of what they're looking for. And then as well as your staff puts in time and effort, and they put in their ideas and develop the idea so that it's everyone as a whole believes in the concept, from the staff to the clientele. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that opportunity, so we've had a lot of hiccups along the way. So first thing was Parliament was spelt in English, which is IA as opposed to the E after Parle. So it's Parliament as opposed to Parliament, which is just the E. So right away we had a problem with the language police, which is a real thing in Quebec.
Which people don't believe me when I talk about the language.
Oh man, I'll show you I'll show you just the notices that they send you. Like you get some serious fines if like even your website if you're a brick and mortar space and your website's in English, you're gonna have a problem. All you need is one person to complain, and the problem is you're in an industry that if you're doing, which is the sad part a little bit in our industry, is that community is a thing, but there's also jealousy that falls into play if you're doing too well versus the guy down the road. So in Montreal, there's 1,000,001 ways to find ways to put a stick in your wheels, as they say. And one of them is just calling the language police and just complaining about something being in English. And that's kind of what happened with us is somebody called the cops on us just saying, hey, they're in English, like it's a problem. So we started with that. So then we looked at that, and then I was going to put a British flag up, and I was like, that's going to cause a big problem. But again, like, falling into history is the concept of this was because of the fact that in front of our building right across the street, it was the original Canadian Parliament that was there before it got burnt down, oddly enough, by the English loyalists, which causes a whole other thing. So we actually developed the concept a little bit more into celebrating heritage. Not just Canadian heritage, but what is Canadian heritage? It's multiculturalism. So we've really zoned in on celebrating multiculturalism as a whole, as opposed to being just singular as an English pub. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where it's developed to now, is that it has an English feel to it in the sense of a pub, but it's the concept itself has developed so much more into multiculturalism, the history of Montreal, the history of how people actually came here, immigration, how it showed up. It came in tiers in Montreal, not only Canada, but in Montreal specifically. And it's really a mini New York, in a sense. The stories aren't as big and developed as New York, i.e. Gangs in New York, but there were smaller stuff like that, and a lot of history that is not talked about. And that's kind of what we're trying to push here.
Well, I think you got to talk about multiculturalism when your head chef is a tiny little Cambodian man.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean a tiny little comment, but you're much smaller than I am.
But yeah.
So with all this, let's fast forward to COVID and everything that's happened, because we were talking off camera about me always trying to look at the silver lining in BC, because I think we've been very fortunate. Like here on the island, we went for a stretch of like 6 to 8 weeks where we had 0 cases on the island. Mm-hmm. Like we hardly had any, and BC's been relatively safe. in our numbers and stuff in comparison to the East Coast. And we're still open. Yes, it's 50%. Yes, it's 50%, and it's got perspex everywhere and that sort of stuff. But I think we have been very fortunate in the way of that. So when COVID started getting locked down for you guys, I'm trying to remember, were you guys a little bit late on the lockdowns, or were you straight away? Because you've been locked down.
March 13th, they announced it. March 15th, we were locked down.
And so you had to shut down everything.
Everything, one shot. I had to, it was one of the hardest days of my life because we kind of knew on the 13th, it was kind of announced, but not really. And then on the 15th, they really announced it. So we let everybody, for me to have to fire people was, especially collectively, where it's not my choice to do so, was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. It was such an awkward thing. And, I had to let go of 48 people, one shot. And I started with 2. It was me and Dan Boulian 5 years ago. And all 38 people gone. And now it's, we're trying to reopen whenever that's going to be. And we're down to 6 employees now total as a company. So it's an interesting problem. It's very, very strange.
So when did you get to reopen during summer? We reopened around the June-ish, July-ish mark.
Our timeline in Quebec has been so garbage, and I'm not going to shy away about saying that.
Oh no, please be open about it.
It's been so poorly managed, and it makes me, as not only me, but plenty of business owners around Quebec look like idiots because we can't even tell our employees what's going on properly because the next day we might be shut down. I'll give you the best example, and this is the example that's just heartbreaking. We got re-shut down for a second time October 1st, and we've been shut down since October 1st for I think a second time. They announced that September 27th. Now, I have friends of mine, I don't want to name names just in case they don't want anyone to know about it, but they announced that they were going to reopen October 1st in basically September 1st. They had, and in order to do that, I think you and I can both agree on the same point here, is that to open a business, you don't just open the day of. You have to get prepared, especially if it's a restaurant. You need at least a week, 2 weeks to do your prep, to do your training, to do everything. It is that everybody's on class. Exactly. They hired everyone 2 weeks before and then got told 3 days before that they have to shut down again. And that means they just reinvested in all their training. They reinvested in hiring all their staff. They reinvested in all their inventory, all their food, everything as a whole. And they had to do a flash opening for, I think, 2 days to try to sell all their food so it doesn't go bad. And you're talking about a fine dining space where it's all fresh fish.
Yeah.
Everything is day of. So it's it was heartbreaking for people like that, and to see things like that happen where it's they were closed this whole time since March and then they were about to reopen and they got shut down again. It's such a loss of money and so many little stupidities. And again, it falls into the same conversation that I think everyone's been having, is it's not even, it's not backed up by science. It's not backed up by anything, as opposed to, especially in Quebec, it's backed up by polls. Because next year, our premier is going under election. So he's making sure that his polls are high. And he's got, I don't know how, an 83% acceptance rate right now, which blows my mind.
So, when did you have a period, like you were just saying, people were reopening for October 1st? Was there a period in summertime that you guys were open?
From, I think it was mid-June to, end of September. It was basically terrace season.
Did you reopen Coldroom and stuff during that? Did you have to do the 6 feet distancing?
Yeah. So everything down the board. Yeah, well, Coldroom fits about 50, 60 people, but tight.
Yeah.
So we had to do all the spacing. So we were only, we made it a point that we were only going to fit 25 people maximum in there with spacing. So we had all the plexiglass everywhere. El Pequeno, we didn't let anyone inside except for a group, maximum 4 people, maximum. And we wanted to make sure that they were all staying in the same, or like they were in the same housing. But we also had a terrace of 35 people, so that kind of saved us. Smallest space in Quebec, but the biggest terrace.
Did they expand out patios during that season?
They didn't expand them, but they didn't say anything if you were expanding. So like they kind of like just turned a blind eye.
Why is there so many blind eyes in Quebec? Why is
I don't know.
We're not going to say you can do it, but if you do, we'll turn a blind eye.
Great question. Great question. So someone's getting paid. So.
So you get shut down in October again, which means you have to furlough all your staff again. Mm-hmm. So you had no Christmas season.
No.
And especially for you, for Coldroom especially, winter is like the season. Like you're very like Clive's. Like no one comes inside. No one is inside during summer in Victoria at Clive's. It's always wintertime is our time. And so you're still currently shut down. And do you have an end in sight right now?
It was supposed to be February 8th, but again, it's like he's already given us 3 different dates. Like October was supposed to only be 28 days.
Yeah.
And now we're going on like 3 full months. Now they've dropped it down in Quebec to colored zones now. Mm-hmm. So Montreal and surrounding of Montreal is in the red zone. And the reason, at least I'm speculating, along with a few others, that the reason the surrounding areas of Montreal are in red zone is because the government knows that all the Montrealers are just going to go 30 minutes away to another town and just get hammered and come back home. Because that's actually what was happening in the summer in October, when everything got re-locked down. They just said, okay, you know what?
Let's hit that one up because we were talking about that off screen. We haven't talked about that on camera, but like we just have a broad. So like a lot of people in Victoria complain that we're getting the same paintbrush as Vancouver. Yeah. Vancouver has a lot higher population, and there's a lot of nightclubs that are still operating. Just recently over the weekend, someone with their 11,000 square foot penthouse was busted with hundreds of people in a penthouse, private penthouse, but the thing had POSs, and the thing had like it was basically a full on like proper nightclub, POS, liquor, bars, the whole shebang. We haven't had the red zone thing, but you were talking about like you can't open, and a lot of your comrades in the downtown Montreal area can't open. Yeah. But everything outside of Montreal is and that's what people are just driving into the next town and getting blasted.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's really tough to hear and see because to be honest with you, I'm not saying I'm not promoting to reopen. That's not what I'm doing at all. What I am doing is just making it fair. Is just arguing that point. If you're just trying to let people survive at this point, because that's what it is. It's just like bars right now. It's like bars specifically cannot serve frozen inventory that's been there since basically March, meaning all the hard alcohol. Like we cannot sell any of that. So we can sell wine, beer, and cider as long as it's with some food. But some of these specialty spots don't have food, or they have little bite-sized things. It's not a meal. So a lot of people, when they order stuff, they order meals. They don't order like, I'm going to order a bag of chips with a cocktail. It's just not a thing. At least that I've seen, unless somebody can show me some numbers saying that, that's what it is. So that's where it kind of falls into this weird, like, just make it fair and let businesses survive for now, ideally. I understand you don't like alcohol. Potentially that's what the government seems to be promoting, which is just falls into, I understand that, but at least give people the chance to survive, because it's just, you're one, destroying the economy, two, destroying small businesses as a whole. It's just like, man, like, well, where is this going? What's the end game right now for the government? Because it just doesn't make sense.
I've talked about this a couple of times. I honestly think that there is a fundamental misunderstanding on just how big the hospitality industry is in Canada, not just in Quebec.
Agreed.
I don't think the government understands how many people are employed, which I think is quite difficult because the government can't wrap their heads around the 16-year-old kid who comes in and barbacks or dishwashers on a Friday night for 3 hours, put a little extra money in his pocket while he's going to university. And I think this fundamental misunderstanding is where a lot of it. I also think there's a level of disorganization in the hospitality industry where we were talking about lobbying groups and that's sort of where you and Andrew have been chatting about like going down that path. But this unified voice across Canada is really difficult because it feels like there's a lot of associations. There's Restaurant Canada, there's BCRFA, and they all have their own agendas, and the unified voice.
That's the problem.
It just I look at it as like everybody's like chihuahuas, like all the advocacy chihuahuas towards the government, and the government's like wholesale pricing. There you go, and the chihuahuas run over there for a little bit, then they'll come back in a bit. And I don't feel there's a unified voice across the board to have the government really understand. We're bigger than the oil industry, and we're bigger than the car industry, but we're not getting the bailouts that they would get if they were in the same position.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000,000%. I think, like, again, myself, Andrew Weebly, and Toby Lyle, Toby from Burgundy Lion, which is basically one of the biggest like pub groups in Montreal and even in Quebec, and Andrew Weebly with Coldroom, who to me, honestly, is one of the best speakeasies in the city, hands down. Super well curated, fantastic. And none of us wanted to go down this path because, again, it's the exact same thing that you're saying and preaching, is that there's just too many people arguing and too many people screaming right now, just me. And everyone's got their own agenda, which is the big issue in our industry. And that's something that really bothers me, is that I wish that hotels, I wish that restaurants, fine dining restaurants, or even comfort food restaurants, I wish cocktail bars, I wish clubs can all come together and just hone in on one thing, and then attack the next part, and then attack the next part. Stop looking to to just fill your pockets, because I understand like everyone has that little side of like, oh, well, I'm going to just make a little extra money on my side and then move forward. But at this point, it's not like it shouldn't be the point. The point should be is like we should all come together and try to change the alcohol laws together to make the government understand how to just advance and sort of be a little bit more like everyone else around the world. Like Canada can't get more. I don't know about everyone else in Canada, but Quebec specifically can't get more advanced in cocktails or in anything alcohol related if the government doesn't pull back a little bit and give us just a touch. And then you're going to see creativity pop up. Like we can't go much further than what we're doing already. And that's a massive issue. And the other problem is that you have this restaurant group that's being paid by McDonald's or being paid by St. Hubert's, which is a chicken place. Since they're funding this major restaurant group, obviously whatever they put up at the table, they're going to be the things that are going to be lobbied. So us smaller guys that want to do, example, craft cocktails to go, we're not going to get hurt in that group, and we're paying fees as much as the next guy, but we're not paying as much as a McDonald's or a St. Hubert's or a KFC, whatever it is. Then we have a bar association, but it's only certain bars. And then you have to look at the language barrier. Then you have the French and the English. So it's like, for us in Quebec, there's just so many layers where it's just like, if everyone could just come together collectively for 5 minutes and just attack one point, even if it's if it's going to help you out as a business or not, just to show unification between the industry. My God, we get so much farther than what we're doing right now.
What's been the general consensus and the feedback from, because I've seen a lot of articles. Obviously I can't read them because they're all in French, but I've seen a ton of articles. What's been the general feedback from the industry and the general consumer about the movement for cocktails to go for bars and restaurants?
Well, look, on our side, we've been getting a lot of media for it. It's definitely tough because, again, like a lot of our media contacts between us three, we basically know everyone in Quebec to speak to. The thing is a lot of them don't even work anymore or got fired because of COVID or whatever it is. So it's like trying to find the contacts now. It's a bit of a, it's tough. And then trying to find the right people in government to push these points is another thing that's very difficult. Again, I think you and I talked about it off camera. We have like the Liberal Party and the Parti Québécois like ready to push this and to bring it to voting. The problem is that the CAQ party, which is in majority right now in Quebec, which is also our premier, his party, they just spent all kinds of money on a non-drinking alcohol campaign for 28 dry February for 28 days. So like, it's not really the right time to push it, but it's like, that's 28 days that you're just killing us again. And again, it's not every place that can sell wine, sell beer. And again, you're selling it at a higher price. And you need to sell it even at a higher price because we have third-party delivery that we have to have with our sales of any kind of alcohol, which is wine, beer, or cider. That's all we're allowed to technically sell. And, those fees go up.
So let's push forward because I don't want to take up too much of your time. What's your plan for 2021? I know that's a crystal ball, but you are opening a new venue. You're working on a new venue as we speak. New venue, new endeavor.
Well, it's exactly what we talked about before. It's diversifying. COVID for me specifically really showed me what my weaknesses are. I have all my eggs in one basket, meaning bars and restaurants. So we're myself and Sam Kirk. We're opening up. Started as a bartender at Coldroom, basically almost 5 years ago, and bumped up to beverage director, to manager, to GM, and now partner. Him and I are opening up basically a retail store, but under a grocery permit. So we're opening up a beer store. And again, in Quebec, under a grocery permit, all you're really allowed to sell is products that are bottled in Quebec specifically. So even then, we still have like 2,000 SKUs of microbrewery beers that are available, wines, ciders. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we got a lot. So yeah. So the idea is we're opening up a grocery store for beer that we can actually deliver without third-party service. It can actually be delivered through our own company. So we're doing it that way. And then we're trying to open 2 or 3 in the next year. And then the goal is potentially to open a microbrewery down the road where we're selling our own products through these retail stores. That's one. And then other thing is I've been, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm getting a little bit more plump. I've been cooking quite a bit and baking. I've been making ice cream and fresh pasta like crazy and doing tests. And we're looking at, again, the reason for this is it's another platform for us to develop products. Mm-hmm. So like I said, we're looking at potentially having a microbrewery to sell our own products. On my side, I'm making ice cream because I would love to start selling ice cream and then seeing if there's a market for it through our store. I could try to sell it through different grocery stores down the road and see if it turns into a product. So those are my things for 2021.
So you like, I think there's a lot of people have said, a few people I've talked to are like the 2020 and 2021 opened up a lot of opportunities. I myself had that happen as well. For 2021, let's tie this off in a nice little bow for everybody at home, for the entrepreneurs that might be watching and listening. What drives you every morning when you wake up? Because especially with 2020, closing down your bars, furloughing staff, all this sort of stuff, you could have quite easily just rolled up in a ball and just gone, fuck it, I'm done. But instead,
I did the first 2 weeks. I think everybody did the first 2 weeks.
Well, you had a very successful pop-up with Shanty out of the back of Parliament, which was fantastic and got a ton of press, which is fantastic pivot. And he is like sort of blown up himself personally now.
That was his brainchild, and honestly, it's done unbelievable, and it's still going on, and it's still gonna keep going on. And I'm really happy for him because, again, it falls into the same thing. I work with people. I try to work with people that if you bring a concept to the table, if I don't have the money to help out, I will figure out a way for it to happen to help out, that you can build your brand, build yourself, whatever it is. And then potentially down the road, we work together.
So what sort of drives you on a personal level to keep pushing for the entrepreneurial sort of spirit and mandates that you have?
For one, my daughter. That's definitely number one. She's like my major drive for me when it comes to working for myself and showing that you can do things on your own, etc. But also, it's just something that I love to do. I have a hard time working for somebody above me, but I love to collaborate with people. I like to come up with ideas together and make it happen. I'm very much an energy guy, in the sense of I'll take a product or a project and just run with it if I really believe in the brand or the idea or the concept, whatever that is. And it's just something I really love to do. I love coming up with new ideas. Like I said before, I went to UCLA for writing for film and television. And if I had the opportunity to get into film and television again, I would, because I love building worlds. And that's kind of what I like in that sense, is the branding side of things and building a world, mainly in spaces. Spaces, if you come to Parliament, you feel like you're in an English pub. If you go to Coldroom, you feel like you're in this old school New York, Chicago Prohibition era bar. If you go to El Pequeno, you literally feel like you're in a hotel in Cuba. Those to me are things, or settings and scenes and scenarios that are important to me for clients to feel. And now I want to sort of transition that into the product side of things, is designing products and coming up with some like really creative brands that are very simple but complex at the same time.
Well, you and I both know we could probably talk for about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
All day, dude.
I think we've done that. We've had 8 hour sessions.
Few times.
Yeah, few times. But thank you so much for your time, man. It was really good catching up with you.
Thanks again, buddy.
It doesn't take it like 3 to 4 months to chat between this again.
Likewise.
I'll see you
Thanks again, buddy.
Okay, bye.
Definitely.